Well, here's the dirty little secret. You need to have a deep technical knowledge, but almost always the right answer is less technical than you might think.
Hey, my name is Felix Tiet. I'm the host of the Culture of Code. In each episode, we bring on a successful and experienced engineering leader to reveal exactly what they've learned about how to grow and succeed in the tech industry. In this episode, I'm joined by John Patton, Senior Director of Solutions Engineering at Salesforce. John is a tech industry veteran with varied experiences and perspectives, having worked in different roles from co-founding a mobile platform for nonprofits to sales distribution to pre-sales to configuration and now engineering. Welcome, John.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah, so first of all, first time we've had someone in the solutions engineering field as a guest on the show. For listeners out there that might not know much about the role, about this kind of team within a company, can you tell us more about like what is solutions engineering?
Yeah, so a lot of times when we are in a sales cycle, there is a sales team that is highly motivated to sell, and their counterparts in this are the solution engineering team who are making sure that we don't just get kind of the business win, but we're actually getting the technical victory as well. So our job is to take the requirements and the goals of the customer and then show them and demonstrate and validate how our solutions, our platform, our technology, whatever it is that we're working on, is able to accommodate for those needs and help them achieve those future states. So it's a lot of configuration, it's a lot of requirements gathering, a lot of storytelling, and always keeping in mind your true north, which is the customer's why at the center of your endeavor.
Yeah, so it sounds like a lot of preparation work before, let's say, initial meetings with the client, before any demos are being shown. Can you tell us more about like the day-to-day work, let's say like this leading up to like a pitch or like the first kind of engagements with a client?
Sure. So the entire process really, if you think about the entire process of getting the customer's requirements, eventually them achieving success as a football field, we kind of operate within the 20s, right? So we don't usually find the conversation at first. Usually it's brought to us and then we start when they have some domain expertise already. The customer might have an understanding of why they're looking at your solution. They might have an understanding of kind of generally what it does. But fundamentally, they're needing us to come in as experts, partway through the process, and really scope and uncover their needs and what they need to see to feel comfortable that the solution can accommodate for their goals. So in that process, we perform what's called discovery. And discovery is when you really have an in-depth conversation. Our partner engineering orgs might call this scoping or scope requirement gathering, but that's all kind of the same header as discovery, where we're uncovering those needs and really getting that clarity. Then we're going to validate those needs with the customer to make sure that they're crystal clear that we have encapsulated and captured everything they need to see in order to move forward. And once we've done that, then it's incumbent upon us to configure, program, build, whatever the job requires, our platform or solution to help them see how that platform and solution can address those needs. And then we show it to them. In the industry, that's often called demonstration. I hate that word. I actually call it a validation, because if we've actually done this correctly, we're not just showing off our technology. We're not just showing off what it can do. We're validating that it can actually accommodate for their needs. Post-validation, at that point, we answer any follow-up questions, and then we kind of stop our engagement and hand it back to the sales team and say, all right, it's up to you to go get signatures from here. Our job is done. We've got the technical win.
The kind of framing that it's a validation that at this point it should already be a pretty close fit and not kind of like a templated showing of what you have available. I think one of the questions that anyone is thinking about coming into solutions engineering is like how much of it is technical, how much of it is a sale, and I'm sure it depends on the industry, the product that you are ultimately selling. But in your experience, like what's the breakdown?
Well, here's the dirty little secret. You need to have a deep technical knowledge, but almost always the right answer is less technical than you might think. And that's what's tricky about this role, is that fundamentally someone might ask a very in-depth technical question. And you may have spent, imagine you're building a website and someone's got a really in-depth JavaScript question for you. And hey, I want to see how we're able to swap out the images in my carousel, or can I swap out the images in this carousel on this site that you built for me? The correct answer most times is just yes. right? That's it. Like, but we as technical people want to show them like, yes, let me show you how you swap out the images in the carousel, right? And so we want to like flip open the page and show them the code and show them where the image references are, and then like swap out the image references and reload the page, recompile, and then have it refresh on the screen. Because that makes us feel smart, right? Because we're able to demonstrate our technical proficiency. But in this role, most of the time, unless you have someone who really doesn't believe you and you don't have that credibility, the correct answer is, yeah, you can swap out the images. Any other questions? And moving on, I mean, the depth of technical proficiency to be able to answer the questions is so important with confidence. But most of the time, it's about understanding the why of the customer. That's the most important skill in this role.
That's interesting that there's probably a compulsion, especially for someone that comes in from more of a technical background, to show the work or kind of like show them how the sausage is made. But you're saying that sometimes that can be counterproductive towards the goal of giving them the answer to how you can achieve it. How do you, I guess, train or teach the people that are coming to you that might have that compulsion to stop doing that or to do that less, or to try to figure out what's the right balance when it comes to these kind of conversations with the client?
It is the number one skill we train for on my team, because we do hire people that are technically proficient. We do hire people that are skilled at building, configuring, etc. So we have these people with this knowledge. And to be clear, that is a requirement of the job. Absolutely need to have that technical knowledge so that you can answer those questions with candor, with transparency. And if the answer is no, the answer is no. But fundamentally, it's really important that we understand that and have that proficiency. Most of what I'm doing in training people and enabling people is asking them to pause and understand the question behind the question. So if someone's asking about, in my example, can you switch images in your carousel? Why are they asking that question? Is it because they're going to be regularly updating their campaigns? Is it going to be because they're regularly updating their content? Is it that they don't have a web person and they're going to have to do it themselves? Like, what's the why behind the question? And so what I would encourage and what I teach my team to do is don't just answer questions. You're not a robot. Your job is not to just question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. Your job is to understand and help them with questions they may not even know they have yet. So in that example, yes, we can change the carousel images, of course. Is that something you're going to be doing, or do you have a agency that's going to be doing that? How often are you going to be doing it? Do you need some sort of interactive layer so that you can do that with a drag and drop? What's spurring this question or concern? Now we're starting to get into their problems in a little more depth. And now our expertise can really shine, because we've probably run into a similar problem before and already solved it for another customer. Whereas the one we're talking to right now is probably solving that problem for the very first time. So we bring domain expertise into the conversation, and that's where that technical background and acumen can really shine, more so than like a traditional salesperson.
I think that that's a really good point about how often asking questions is maybe more useful than just answering the question that they have, to showing that there is a deep understanding of their problem and that you've solved before because you've been able to think about these kind of questions because of experience. So what's the typical background of someone that comes into solutions engineering? Is it usually from an engineering kind of background, or are they coming from sales and becoming more technical?
Well, I see traditionally three. One, in the world I'm in, I'm heavily into nonprofits and education. So one is someone who is technical in the industry. So maybe they were running marketing for a nonprofit, or maybe they're head of communication at a campus. And so they come in with the proficiency in the tools and the industry knowledge. And that's fairly common. So if you're working in financial institution, maybe someone that was running appeals for a bank, right? So that's kind of one background, practitioner experience. The second is kind of tool or domain experience. So the world I'm working in is predominantly marketing or engagement centric. And so maybe it's someone that has really strong domain experience on a different marketing tool. Maybe they've been a product marketing manager before on a different tool, but they have domain expertise on the industry, whether that be payments or whether that be marketing or whatever, but industry experts. And then the third person, which I think is the one that excites me the most, is more someone that has technical acumen for sure, but is more of a storyteller, communicator, facilitator type person. And I think this is kind of like the perfect blend of all those pieces, this role, because you get to flex those different muscles that you have. Someone that can build rapport and speak technically is incredibly powerful in this role. In fact, my number one screening question on the interviews is just to uncover intellectual curiosity. People that are constantly curious about just the world around us tend to be fantastic at this job. So my favorite question to ask is, what's your hobby that you could give a 10-minute TED talk on impromptu? What's your hobby? And it could be model airplanes, or I'm really into SpaceX, or whatever it is. But, what are you really intellectually invested in? And what have you really dug into to uncover to become an expert on? People who can answer that question tend to be fantastic at this level.
Yeah, and hearing you talk about this makes me believe that the domain knowledge that's required to succeed in this role is maybe more important than in more highly technical roles. Coming from like the software engineering background, you can kind of become useful in a small area pretty quickly as a software engineer. But the ramp up sounds like it's much larger when it comes to solutions engineering. Do you find that to be the case? Like, what is the ramp up to get someone gain this knowledge so that they can be effective in this role?
Yeah, I think the importance of onboarding can't be understated. A lot of time, I'm hiring people who don't have the domain or the product expertise or the solution expertise out of the gate. And so we're ramping them up on the solution capabilities. I would rather train someone on how to understand a solution, how to configure a solution, how to build lightweight queries in the solution, etc. I'd rather train someone on that than how to engage a room or how to facilitate a conversation. There's some of those more innate skills that are really hard to train. So I would rather have them be really competent at the soft skills and train them on the technical than have them be super competent in the technical and try to train them on the soft skills. Maybe that's just because I'm not a good enough coach at coaching those soft skills. That's entirely possible. But I think the lift to get technical capabilities is lower than the lift for someone who's going to get really comfortable facilitating a bunch of conversations with C-level executives.
Yeah, I think that there's just less opportunities to get the reps in as well when it comes to the soft skills, like the more technical skills, you can kind of learn those on your own. There's the feedback cycles are much shorter when it comes to these soft skills. Are there ways that you can, I guess, improve those when you're not in like the setting of like being inside a meeting room with these, C-suites or executives? Like, how do you get the reps in to build those soft skills?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we work with our product team and engineers on our product team. And one of the things that I've noticed that is sometimes an opportunity for improvement is they want to come in and just show you the features, right? They want to just like, here's the feature we built. Here's the thing it does. Next feature we built. Here's the thing it does. And there's always this one more step that would make a world of difference. And that is centralizing on the why or the true north ahead of time. Hey, we had a deficiency here and our customers were saying this. So we built this and here's how it works. And let me tie it up in a bow for you. Here's how it solves this problem. And so I think whether you're in pre-sales engineering or whether you're in hardcore coding, always keep in mind the why behind what you're doing. And if you don't understand it and you're working on a project, go ask your questions until you have a clear why. Because those soft skills of being able to take what you've done, the hard work you've done and building and coding and configuring and compiling and being able to translate that into the business value of what you've accomplished is maybe the most underutilized and underappreciated skill in engineering. If you can take the project you're working on and define what's different in the world because of what you did, you are going to set yourself apart from your engineering peers. And that's the time, regardless of what you're working on, to work on those soft skills. Build the business case for the work you're doing. Don't neglect that skill. Don't neglect that muscle, because that is going to help you show that you have a wider purview than just engineering.
That's a great point about how there's almost, I want to say, an allergic reaction to diving into like the business side as an engineer or a software engineer or someone that's more technical. But there's almost like this like insurmountable wall that it separates the engineers from, let's say, more of a work, let's like a product manager might do, is the closest that they might get to business, and almost feels like that's not my job kind of reaction to it. What's your recommendation for someone that wants to take this great advice that you're offering? How can they start taking steps towards kind of expanding their scope so that they're not just executing or implementing, but they're actually understanding the why and be able to speak to why they're working on something?
There's this beautiful framework that I use and that my team uses when we're doing any project, and it's called tell, show, tell. And if you took communication 101 in college, then you probably know this, tell them what you, or tell them what you're going to tell them and tell them what you told them. Same thing. And so I would say when you're in this space and you get those requirements, you get that sticky note, right? And like, here you go. Here's your thing to do, without being pain in the neck, just say, awesome. Excited for this. Hey, help me understand how this fits into the bigger picture. Of course, I'm going to do it. Help me understand what this does, because I can execute on this. I can get this done, and I will. But what if there's a better way to do all of this? What if this project that I'm doing right here is really not the best way to accomplish your broader objective? And that's where the creativity and the technical knowledge have to commingle. Because if someone's giving you, like the example I gave with carousel earlier, if someone's like, I need an image carousel, and you're like, okay, great. So you find a JavaScript library, you build this thing, and all they needed to do was be able to update their content easily. You're like, oh, we could have just done any number of solutions here, but because I didn't ask the question up front about why you needed this to happen, I just executed on something that may or may not be the best fit for what you wanted to accomplish. I really encourage you, especially engineers, and listen, my dad's an engineer. I've got engineers all over my family. I would call myself a JV engineer in this space. You got to understand how to make yourself more valuable at your organization. And the way to do that is to show that you have the technical acumen, but you also have the business acumen to improve process, improve outcomes, and connect your work to that bigger vision. So I would encourage people lean into that very heavily. And then, of course, all the things you would expect: technical proficiency, execution, etc.
I like how that's super actionable, where you gave the question to ask whenever someone's given a task to do, like ask that question. I think there's a lot of fear right now in the tech industry about with ChatGPT and AI taking over jobs. And I think whether that happens or not, I don't know, but the creativity, the aspect of it, being able to connect from the technical to the business side, that's not as easily replaceable as someone that's just strictly implementing what was given to them. So you actually credit, we talked about this just now, but you also credit that this ability to translate or understand the meaning behind like the why has been beneficial to your career. Can you tell us more about this? Like, how have you been able to use this ability to show that you have this capability to connect the technical with the business, to be able to truly understand the why, to actually advance your career?
Yeah. So my career is kind of a funny story. I did 10 years in sales, outside sales, and all that stuff, right? So account executive, all the people, the engineering team was like, oh, that was me. So, and then did that pretty well. And my heart and my brain got captured by nonprofits because I just kind of saw some problems in the world and was going to these dinners where we're raising paddles and giving money. And then I was just disgusted with myself because a week after going to this event, I wouldn't even be thinking about the cause anymore, right? I'd be just so back in my own little world. So I built a nonprofit mobile giving platform. And the idea was connecting individual moments of my week to a cause that I care about. Right. So if you're showing up at Starbucks, you're like, hey, the app pops up and says, you're going to spend $4 at Starbucks right now when you rather give $4 to hungry kids and just skip the coffee and be like, in fact, I would. Right. And so we built this app and I really said, oh, I got to get into the nonprofit space. A job opened up in the nonprofit arm at the company I'm at, where I was focused on social media and social media solutions. I had the good fortune of being able to demo that solution quite well and quite successfully in my sales career. And so I was able to transition into more of a technical expert. So I had a little bit of a non-traditional background getting into engineering, but I've had the technical proficiency to accommodate for that. From there, I got my MBA and I started going through this process of really relearning the platform that we have as our company. And so one Friday afternoon, my boss came up to me and said, hey, we don't have enough business to work in social. So you either need to find a new job or you need to learn our entire platform. That was a fun weekend. Spent the whole weekend learning the platform. And Monday I had my first demonstration of the platform. From there, what was really interesting was I had the technical proficiency to do it. I'm just fortunate to have that. But I didn't have any of the legacy baggage of here's how we demo, here's how we do this, here's what a good engineer looks like. And I was able to build my own stories of how I want to talk about the solution. I was able to build my own vignettes of how I want to talk about the technology. And that worked really well for me because my peers at the time predominantly were really into the tech, like really into the coding. And so I was able to zoom up a level above that and talk about not just what it could do, but why it could do it. And that helped me grow from junior solution engineer now to senior director of solution engineering, just by really, that was the whole trick, was getting to the why the whole entire time. And then, have a team reporting up to me now and trying to help them do the same.
Yeah, and one thing you mentioned to us was that being a good translation layer between these different layers within a company is super important, but then also often difficult, especially at a company, let's say the size of Salesforce or any large company, that could become difficult. What does that mean to be a translation layer, and like any advice on how to become proficient at that?
Well, I think everybody suffers from imposter syndrome. I certainly do as well. And so when you have the person who's more technical than you talking, we're always like, I hope they don't figure out I'm not as technical as they are. And then when you have the business expert over here talking, you think to yourself, gosh, I hope they don't figure out that they understand the forecasting technology or the business analytics better than I do. And what I've come to realize is that everyone feels that way all the time. And so there's huge power in being able to own that and being able to step into the room and be the translation layer, in the sense of, hey, I hear you saying this from a technical perspective. Can you distill that and simplify it for the rest of the room here? Or if you feel so confident, you take a stab at what they mean. I heard you say you're doing blah, 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 blah. I think what I heard you say is you're really accomplishing these 3 or 4 things. Did I get that right? I think the power of having someone who's willing to step into that space and confirm and validate everything that's being said, and then turning it over to the next person. Did you get that? Does that make sense to you? Is that what you were hoping to get out of this call? Just that facilitation between the different people not only helps you understand different points of view and helps build kind of your internal knowledge and capabilities, but it makes you invaluable to every single process that's happening in the organization, because you're the person that's going to make sure that the business and the technical are all put together and compiled into a cohesive strategy. There isn't an orchestration role in most organizations, which I think, like, if I was starting a company from scratch, I would have an orchestrator who was kind of sitting between the different functions. They have product marketing, which kind of does that to a degree when done well. Sometimes that doesn't happen. I think someone who's actually orchestrating this process cohesively and making sure that sales, distribution, product, engineering, marketing are all kind of working together well. There's an opportunity to step into that space and translate.
Yeah, I love that. I never thought about that value in being the person's willing to be vulnerable, where has this imposter syndrome. Everyone's worried about being exposed. So everyone's focused on showing rather than
Yeah.
truly trying to provide value. And you coming in and being willing to take the sacrifice by admitting, not necessarily admitting, but like asking the quote unquote dumb question so that the translation can happen is highly valuable, because you don't get that much in meetings at all. A lot of people will hear things, they don't understand it, but they don't want to look like they don't know what they're talking about. So they don't
Yeah.
say anything. But owning that and stepping into and being almost like unashamed about what you might not know is super powerful, and almost is a skill that comes with free too, because you kind of just are being led by either curiosity or being led by what you don't know, and those are easy things to tap into. I love that.
Yeah, exactly. If you can war against shameless self-promotion and shameless self-preservation, right? Those are the 2 things that we all smell it when someone's got those 2 kind of characteristics. Someone's just here for themselves. You can sense it, right? You can sense it in the room really quickly. This person sees me as a resource they can use to get what they want. They don't even see me as a peer or a person, right? You can never be that person. Like, that is toxic to your relationship and your career. And then self-preservation, just this concern about everyone's perception of you. But in reality, I bet the people you like the most, and I bet the people that we all relate to the most, are not necessarily people that are super worried about how they come on, right? Not jerks, but they're like, hey, I didn't get that. Can you unpack that for me? And they're friendly about it, but they're not trying to posture. And when someone's trying to posture, especially because we're all so technical, we can smell it, right? When the salesperson is trying to posture and ask like a really great question to show they understand the product, and you're like, that's not as good a question as you think it is, right? It's uncomfortable. But when someone actually steps in and says, hey, I want to make sure I got this right, I want to make sure everyone's on the same page, I want to make sure that everyone who's maybe not kind of in this place, this Zen-like place of not self-promoting and not self-preserving, I'm going to create a safe place for them to come by being vulnerable first. That is so powerful. They're going to want you in every conversation.
Yeah, that's so hilarious hearing you talk about it, where it's almost like there's this game that's so easy to slip into that everyone plays, but everyone also knows that you're playing the game. So it's like it's very interesting that someone can just be more kind of break through the wall there and play this role. And I really appreciate that advice. So if someone's considering a career in solutions engineering and they don't know what the job is like and they see a job description out there, talk to us about all the different types of solutions engineering. It's kind of a big umbrella, right, of solutions engineering. I hear about pre-sales, post-sales, like deployment. Like there's so many different things that are involved in the sales cycle. Do you find that there are that many differences between the different roles? Like, will one type of role be a lot different than others? Like, tell more about like what you see in the comes like job market for anything that falls within that solutions engineering.
So I think there's kind of different shades of solutions engineering, to your point. Well put. There are pre-sales engineering. That's my world that I live in, is the pre-sales engineering. And we're the ones who are going to be gathering those requirements, discovery, validation, follow-up questions, etc. Now, we may get a practitioner on the call who really does want that done, right? They want to understand it at the like code level. And so sometimes we may get people that can go even beyond what our technical capabilities are. So we have an architecture team or an experts team that we can bring in, or they can parachute in. I would say they get used in less than 10% of opportunities, but when you need them, boy, it's great to have them there. So if you're a little more technical and maybe a little less storyteller, relational, facilitational, the architect roles for pre-sales engineering is a really good thing to look at, especially if you're coming from a more traditional engineering background. It's going to be a smaller lift to go from where you're at to an architect than it is to go from here to like a pre-sales engineer. You can work those muscles in the architect, like, hey, I want to get really good at discovery, right? That's a skill set that you can hone. There's these pre-sales engineers, there's architect. Then there are also people who are scoping, like professional services or post-sales support. And there are people that are really good at taking an implementation, looking at that technology and figuring out opportunities for improvement. So almost like ongoing optimization, or I always call it proper care and feeding. But the idea of kind of these post-sales engineers who are technical and capable and are also going to be with that customer for the duration of the time they're with your organization. So they're going to need to have not just take on what the customer might do, but they're going to have to go into like the actual practical of here's exactly how you should do it. Once you're done with that, do this. Once you're done with that, do this. And those have various roles and titles at different organizations. Some are called like customer success managers or post-sales support or whatever, but there's engineering roles inside of those as well. And then I would say outside of that, other thing that we do see on occasion in pre-sales engineering is domain experts as well, which is kind of fun because people that understand how the product works, but maybe they're not as technical in the product, but they're really familiar with how other customers are deploying that solution or configuring that solution in order to achieve great results. And so they come in almost at a strategic layer more than a technical layer. And but they have to understand the tech so that they can talk about the strategy and how to deploy that technology in a meaningful way to achieve your outcomes. And so like in that world, there's strategic advisors or pre-sales consultants or any of those types of roles. And those are kind of the big ones that I see in the space.
What do you find is like the biggest myth that people that are looking from the outside looking in have about solutions engineering that you just find like completely untrue? That's like the biggest kind of misconception about the role.
I think that we're like as deep and as technical as some of the other engineering departments. Sometimes people hear engineering in the title and they're like, oh, you would love to code? You're like, no, not particularly. No, not my favorite. So I think we hear that. Other one that I hear sometimes is basically, and there's some truth to this at times too. So, but the idea that you're going to show kind of the Ferrari, you're going to come in and demonstrate a Ferrari for someone that just needs a moped. And, you're going to come in and show your environments and all the things you've built over the years of working there, thousands of hours of development that have gone into this. and you're going to go in and show this to a customer who's doesn't have the internal skills or the budget or any of those things, right? To drive the Ferrari. They're like, I need a bicycle and you just showed me a fighter plane. And so I think there's some truth to that, is that sometimes this role can oversell, can over suggest what the customer should be doing versus actually taking an honest step back, trying to understand, do they have the people, process, budget, et cetera, to accomplish their goals? And what's kind of like the minimum viable solution they need in order to be set up for today and tomorrow. So those are the big two. One, that we love to code, and that, we're just a bunch of nerds who are going to come in and not help you in your sales cycle because all we want to do is talk about the tech. That's what wakes us up in the morning. And the flip side of that, we're going to come in there and just show them this fully like ridiculously configured environment that the customer would never be able to build themselves.
Yeah, speaking of that first point about how you might be seen as someone that is like coming in as overly technical, and that's the only contribution that you can make, given that, let's say, the actual like salesperson that's like your partner in all of this is such a big partner involved in not only the deals, the clients that you're targeting, but also probably in your career as well. How do you make sure you build credibility or build a good partnership with your counterpart in this process?
I love that question. People are people. So I think relational capital is a real thing. You have to build that relational capital. One of the things that I found to be really helpful is to have post-engagement conversations and ask, and we're not seamless self-promoters. We're not self-preserving. So ask for feedback. Hey, I think that went pretty well, or I think that went off the rails. What could we have done differently? And then listen. The one thing I think we love to, I will say for me, I love to tease the salespeople. It's what gives me joy in my heart. But the one thing about it is that they went into that role in a lot of cases because they have good instincts and good human instincts for understanding people. And if they saw something that you didn't see, then you should listen to it. You really went on too long about that with that answer, or you could have simplified that a ton and then internalize that. Replay in your mind. Okay, how could I have simplified it? How could I have given them a more clear and concise answer? I would say be willing to just lean in and be vulnerable. The salespeople will tell you. They will absolutely tell you, but you have to ask. And then the other thing I would say is get a mentor, get someone who is able to stand up in front of those C-level executives and have that presentation, have those conversations and facilitate, and have them help you get to that level. It's not rocket science. It's intellectual curiosity and relationship and technical acumen.
I love that the first advice of having these like post sales meetings where you need to build like feedback cycles into your life or into your career if you want to grow. Otherwise, you're coming to these meetings and then you're leaving and then you don't know if you did well or not. Like not having that built in, I think hampers your growth. And I love that advice of meeting with someone that's going to give you honest feedback, whether it be a mentor or your sales counterpart is. And then what's one last question is for someone in your position, I'm sure a lot of people come to you and ask you advice or ask you questions about getting into this field. What do you find is like the most common question that you get from people that are looking to transition into solutions engineering, looking to get into it for the first time?
Yeah. So depending on your background, you're probably going to have some deficiencies. And I think that what I would recommend is people who are saying, how do I get into this role? You have to have an honest assessment of yourself. So I'll be vulnerable for me in keeping with the theme of our conversation here. I came in with really good presentation skills. I came in with decent technical skills, but I had fairly limited industry experience, and especially in education, right? And so when I'm applying for this role that's going to be covering education and nonprofits, and my technical skills are acceptable, but not great, I needed to have a plan to demonstrate how I was going to ramp up my technical proficiency as well as become an expert on those industries. I think when I'm looking at hiring someone, if those are like the three legs of the stool, I rarely find someone that's got all three. But I'll tell you, the people that tend to be successful in getting the opportunities are the ones that have a plan to get all three, right? So if I'm not as proficient in the industry, what am I going to do to become an expert on education? What am I going to do to become an expert on the nonprofit space in my case? If you're in financial, what are you going to do to become an expert in financial? Are you going to take some CFP courses? Like, what's your plan? have that plan ahead of time so that when you're asking someone who's going to be hiring, hey, I'm thinking about making a change. I understand you want these three things. I've got two of them, and here's my plan to get a third. If I did that, would I be an ideal candidate for what you're looking for? Make sure you've got a plan to get to becoming that ideal candidate. And then, that's no guarantee that you're going to get a job just because you did it, but you're certainly setting yourself apart from everybody else who comes in and says, oh, I guess I just have a deficiency here, right? Or maybe they'll look past it. So build that plan in place. And that's the number one question I get is, how do I get into this space? How do I get started? That's it. Have a plan to build kind of that ideal candidate profile for yourself.
But later in the career path, you're obviously a manager at this point. You have a team that's underneath you, a large team underneath you. Is that the typical path into that you're great at solutions engineering? Now you move into management. Because I think a lot of, let's say, people coming from the more software engineer background, they prefer to not step into management. They prefer some kind of IC track. Is that as available in solutions engineering?
It is. Yeah. In fact, people leadership is a totally different skill than the actual solution engineering. One could argue they are totally unrelated, but I think the principles of not being a self-promoter and not being a self-preserver, I think actually work really well for people leadership as well. So, kind of a happy coincidence there. But what I would say is that the individual contributors, I think maybe the best role at the company I'm at is the top level individual contributor. I mean, like if you were saying, hey, John, for the next 10 years of your life, you're going to do a role at this company, press a button and pick it. I might pick that role because you are seen as the go-to for the most complex and frankly fun opportunities. But you also don't have people that are reporting to you, especially, I mean, I don't know if everyone's on LinkedIn, but it's kind of a crazy time right now in tech. So, especially in these moments, you can really just kind of control your book of business and execute. So, um, I would say think twice before people leadership. And that being said, I do think that some people have I always joke with my team, it's the burden of actually caring, right? It's not a facade. Like I really do care about the people on my team. I can't help it. And so in my case, I've hired all these people. I've brought them in. I've tried to make sure that they've got opportunities in their career. I'll be damned if I'm not going to keep caring about them and working for them. But there's really great opportunities if you don't want to do that. I mean, really great opportunities if you don't want to do that in an individual contributor role.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. John Patton, Senior Director of Solutions Engineering at Salesforce. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of your advice and experience with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. If anyone listening to it wants to connect, find me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to help. I love helping people. It's my ethos. So find me and connect and we'll go from there.
Yeah, awesome. We'll make sure to link to your LinkedIn in the show description. Appreciate it.
Awesome.
And that's all the time we have for this episode. Come join us next time on the Culture of Code. Again, I'm Felix Tia. Take care.